I think it's very important to understand that the view of the Jews as alien, which was common in Europe and may still be common in parts of Europe till today, is not something that Jews experienced elsewhere. And we tend to project this European image of Jews on Jews elsewhere. And I think in the countries of Islam, without idealizing them, life was a lot more harmonious and peaceful. And in the case of Jews in Iran, they've been there for 25 centuries. And they're perceived as Iranians, not as an alien group. Arab Jews from lands of Islam had not played any important role in the emergence and the development of either Zionism or Zionist settlement in Palestine. However, when the state was unilaterally declared in May 1948, Jews were associated by some leaders with Israel, particularly because Israel itself was saying that it is a state of all the Jews in the world. But what happened after 1948, for example, in the case of Iraq, Israeli government negotiated a deal with the Iraqi government that would allow Jews to leave. But Jews were in no rush to leave. See, this is very important because Jews had lived there for centuries, and like Abishalaim, Sojal, they were settled, they spoke Arabic, they were Arabs for all practical purposes with a different confession. So Zionist activists had to do something to prod them to leave. And here we come to a very sad episode, well, sad page of the history of Zionism, when Zionist activists actually committed acts of violence against Jews and against Jewish institutions in order to prod them to leave. You know, there was explosion in Jewish institutions in Iraq. There were similar events in Egypt. In Morocco, Zionist activists frightened Jewish girls, and the Zionist activists actually told me, one of them told me this whole story, and that may be worth telling you, that they would dress like Muslims, taken to another town in Morocco where no one knew them, and they would harass Jewish girls in order to frighten their parents. You know, the worst things that can happen is that a girl would be molested. And that really moved quite a few people out of Morocco to Israel or somewhere else. And many years later, after I heard the story, I met a Moroccan Jewish woman who actually confirmed that she was on the receiving end of it in her town. But it was enough to frighten her parents. I mean, that was bad enough. For the Zionist movement, for Ben-Gurion, for those who created the state, it famously or infamously, Ben-Gurion is quoted as saying that he would rather save half of the children, Jewish children that could be sent to Palestine, rather than all of them if they are sent somewhere else. So for them, the state is a lot more important than individual. These are the cardinal articles of faith for the Zionist. Antisemitism is eternal, it's impossible to uproot, and therefore the only solution is for all the Jews to live in their own state. So I think that the living by the sword is part of Zionist ideology. I think the only way to bring about peace and end of violence is do what Jews do everywhere else, namely they live as a minority in different countries. And I think that one of the reasons that Benjamin Netanyahu started the war when he did 40-something days ago is that he felt that the ice under his feet is melting.
Right.
Support for Israel is melting in the United States. You know, today the majority of Americans pro-Palestinian, not pro-Israeli. That's unprecedented. And that has been the case in Europe for a long time. It is not being translated into policies of the government. But what we do see is that Israel is losing support. You know, the fact that recently a member of Polish parliament produced an Israeli flag with a swastika in the middle instead of the Star of David is telling you about the breaking of consensus concerning Israel. So the propaganda can work only so much. You know, recently, General Assembly of the United Nations adopted a resolution about reparation for slavery, and 3 countries voted against it: the United States, Israel, and Argentina. And The European Union abstained. And there is a movement of rehabilitation of colonialism. There are signs of it. The fact that the United States accepted a few thousand refugees, political refugees last year, all of them white South Africans, that tells you something about the changes we're living. So on the one hand, yes, the support for Israel is melting and people are realizing what Israel is about. On the other hand, there were strong forces that tried to return us to a time of colonial domination and white pride and European pride. And we shouldn't forget that the colonial past is very, very recent. You know, Israel is the embodiment of the most right-wing racist ideologies today. Many Israelis are first and foremost victims of their own state. That's why you have quite a bit of exodus from Israel, not only because of the war and because of the difficulties of living under constant threat, but because many don't want to be part of it. I think that this message is being received in Israel. So I think that there may be an awakening within Israel among part of the population that they may be better off in Brooklyn. The state of Israel represents the state of Israel. It doesn't represent Jews. And the Jews have always been divided as far as Zionism and Israel is concerned. And many Jews, particularly young Jews, are very active in anti-Zionist activities and criticizing Israel and so on. It's totally wrong to associate Jews in their countries with Israel. So it's very important in our own countries to debunk the myth of Jew as an eternal victim, to fight against anti-Semitism, because one of the main purveyors of anti-Semitism is the state of Israel. And this is not something which is an accident or circumstantial. Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, wrote very clearly in his diary, anti-Semites will be our most reliable friends and anti-Semitic countries most reliable allies.